Hello, it is World Wide Web Wednesday, December 18th, 2019. Steve Sipress here along with Santa Claus and some presents that he has. Where are they? Oh, there they are. Santa has some presents over here that he's bringing for all the good girls and boys. And my beautiful wife, Michelle, has gone a little crazy with the Christmas lights here. We got them all over the place, around the fountain, up in the air, over there, all over the place. Beautiful evening here, beautiful Arizona. It's been a little on the chilly side for about a couple of weeks. Got to put in a word to Greta Thunberg or whatever, and Al Gore, or maybe somebody that knows even an inkling about science, to come down here and warm things up. Because I don't know what's going on in the rest of the globe, but it is not warming here. Anyway, so I titled today's video, Webinar Slamming. Now, I made that up. It's what I call it. It harkens back to the roaring 80s, I believe it was, maybe the 80s and 90s, of the long-distance phone company competition. When the federal government here in the U.S. deregulated Ma Bell, it created a frenzy of activity. All kinds of long-distance carriers, phone companies, were popping up, vying for everyone's service. If you remember back then, if you don't, I'll just give you a little inkling of what happened. We'd get a call just about every day, probably every business did. Hey, send me a copy of your latest bill and I'll let you know how much money we could save you. And so all the time back then it was fax machines. So we would fax over the latest copy of the bill, and then they would claim, oh, well, that thing is 25 cents a minute. We're only 23 cents a minute. And then we have overnight, evening rate. I see you late. We're making a lot of calls during this time of day, and we have a special here with each company, Sprint and Verizon and on and on and on. They were all so convoluted. They all had different plans, kind of like today. The cell phone companies, they all have different plans, and back then different whatever. So it was all confusing, and you were constantly getting pitched on switching. And there was a charge for switching your long distance carrier. I even think it was only like $5, but part of the pitch was, hey, we'll pay the switching fee. And so we'd just switch back and forth, $5. They'd pay for it. You'd switch here, you'd switch here, you'd switch there. WorldCom, all these different ones. I even, the bid I got, the $1.75 million offer for 45% of my first multi-million-dollar company came from a long-distance company. My game, it was a sports game where nobody, had computers, and the internet back then wasn't by any stretch of the imagination a big deal yet in the 80s. And so people were pretty much making a lot of long-distance phone calls, my customers. And so the phone company wanted all these people as customers. They were willing to acquire my company to get my customers. Anyway, so slamming was the term for switching somebody from one phone company to another without their consent. So suddenly I thought I was with AT&T, and now I'm with WorldCom, and then I'm with Sprint, and then I'm with whatever. That's called slamming. Illegal practice. And so this term I'm calling webinar slamming comes from, I see it happening more and more, that I'm not just getting an invitation to register for a webinar. I'm getting a reminder email saying, hey, the webinar you're registered for is happening, tomorrow at 6:00. Click here to join. And so and it's happening for a while now. It's been happening from one top marketer. I'm on a whole bunch of email lists of top marketers, of course, because I study marketing, right? So I watch infomercials on TV, and I read all of my mail, and even mail that others would call junk mail, and I'll answer the door no matter what salesman comes and listen to their pitch and talk to them. And I talk to telemarketers when they call, and so I'm on a lot of email lists, and I read a lot of emails from marketers. I am a never-ending student of advertising, marketing, and sales. One reason I'm able to get such great results for my clients, which reminds me, if I don't mention it and you want some help, I offer a brief phone call with help to people that are not my clients. You go to helpfromsteve.com and I'll help you out. And then maybe someday, who knows when, you make enough money with what I teach you, maybe you'll want to make a lot more and become a client. But even if you don't, helpfromsteve.com will help you out. Anyway, now I'm seeing it more and more. So if you have an email list, instead of sending an invitation to your next webinar, and I'm guessing you could even do it to a live in-person event, although that seems a little crazier. I want to really know who's coming to my live events because I got a plan. I got to have enough space and food and materials and all that kind of stuff. I got to know if I got to set up an AV system so they can hear me in the back of the room, or if it's a smaller room, if I don't need a microphone and all that. I mean, I really want to know who's coming. But for a webinar, people that have a list of hundreds of thousands are skipping the step where they say, hey, please come to this webinar. You're invited. And here's what it's all about, bullet points, this, that, click here to register. They're like, the heck with that. Let's just send an email. And then, of course, as with all of marketing, advertising, and sales, the most important part, pretty much in this case, almost the entire persuasive part of this webinar reminder / invitation is the title of the webinar, the headline. That's the most important part of all your advertising and marketing. And so, for instance, I'll get this email saying, hey, the webinar you are registered for, here's a reminder that it's starting, tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And then they'll say the title, the webinar you are registered for, how to, make $1 million without working at all in 22 seconds. Whatever the title is, that they're slamming me into this webinar. In other words, they are putting me into as if I registered for it without my consent. I call that the slamming, reminiscent of the old phone days where they would slam someone from one carrier to another. Now, of course, it's no harm, no foul. I mean, I can just not show up, delete the email, whatever. It's not like being switched from a phone carrier, of course. But that's what I'm calling it. When you put somebody into something without an invitation, it happens also in social media. People will, I don't know if you can still do it, and as of the time you're watching this video, social media is changing all the time. The whole internet is. So who knows if it still happens, but I remember getting slammed into Facebook groups. Suddenly you're a member of this group. Didn't ask you if you wanted to join. Well, same thing people are using with webinars. They're simply saying, hey, Steve, here's a reminder of the webinar you registered for, or you are registered for. And I'm like, am I registered for that? Whatever. Good enough. They're saving me the trouble if I want to get on it. All I got to do now, I'm registered. So I can skip the step of reading all about it and deciding if I want to register and putting in my name and email. So in a way, I appreciate it. But then again, I'm the guy that talks to telemarketers and talks to door-to-door salespeople and reads all my junk mail, and so watches infomercials. I love advertising, marketing, and sales. So if the webinar sounds interesting, I'll get on it. And I don't really care that they slammed me on and skipped the step where they invited me and I could either register or not. They just registered me. I think that's kind of cool. You might think it's kind of rude that they registered you without you actually registering yourself. So you might want to use this tactic, you might not, but I'm telling you, some top marketers that I know are making a ton of money, and clearly they wouldn't be doing this if it didn't work. So if you want to discuss this, as always, along with anything else, go to helpfromsteve.com and we'll talk about it. As always, you might want to use the tips I give, and you might not be as gung-ho about some things. You might grab right onto another one. That's why I'm here every day with some more business building tips. Speaking of which, I'll be back tomorrow on Throwback Thursday. So Santa and me say that'll do it for today, and I will catch you tomorrow. Over and out. Bye-bye.